Dust moved like slow, dying breath across the empty main street of Elderwood, twisting through broken fences and abandoned wagons as if searching for something left behind. The sun hung low, a copper coin melting into the ridge of red canyons, casting the town in a strange half-light that made everything look older than it was. Folks said Elderwood used to sing with life, miners, ranchers, travelers, but now it whispered more than it spoke. The only sound breaking the stillness came from the saloon, an old, crooked piano with half its keys missing, plinking out a tune played by memory rather than skill. Inside, behind the counter worn smooth by 1,000 lonely nights, stood Evelyn Hart, a silver-haired widow whose face carried the softness of kindness and the quiet weight of stories she never told. No one knew where she came from. No one knew what she had survived. But they all trusted her, the way dying men trust light. The soft evening hush was shattered by the heavy thud of boots stomping across the saloon porch. The batwing doors flew inward as Brick Dalton, red-eyed, half drunk, half mean, and fully dangerous, swaggered inside with a pistol on each hip and a grin soaked in whiskey. His presence filled the room like a storm cloud no one could stop. The piano halted mid-note. Men at tables stiffened, women froze in place. Brick was the kind of man who hurt for pleasure, who laughed at fear, who believed himself king over every breath in the room. Evelyn was handing a cup of water to a dusty traveler, when Brick's voice cracked through the silence. "Well, look at this," he drawled, stumbling toward her. "The old lady still thinks she's running a charity." A few men lowered their eyes to their boots. Some swallowed hard. No one answered. No one dared. Brick leaned over the counter, breath thick with liquor, and tapped the cup out of Evelyn's hand. Water splashed across the floor. "You serve beggars now," he sneered. "Or you just enjoy pretending you matter?" Evelyn didn't flinch. "He was thirsty," she said softly. Brick barked a laugh that made the room colder. "Then he should learn to drink dust. That's all this place deserves." He turned his head slowly, daring anyone to look him in the eye. No one did. Not a single soul in Elderwood wanted to invite Brick Dalton's attention. The gunslinger soaked in their fear like it was whiskey. He loved this, ruling by the threat of violence, and tonight, he wanted to remind Elderwood that he owned it. Evelyn stepped around the counter to clean the spilled water, hands steady, movements calm. Brick watched her with irritation growing like fire in dry grass. "Old woman," he said, his voice dipping into something darker. "You think walking away from me is polite?" She kept wiping. Brick's jaw tightened. With a hard shove, he knocked her to the floor. Gasps rippled through the saloon, but no one moved. She placed a hand on the floor, rising slowly, her bones aching but her dignity untouched. Brick grabbed her wrist, squeezing until her fingers turned white. "You spilled a drink," he hissed. "And now you kneel. Right here. In front of everyone watching. Evelyn lifted her chin. Her eyes, soft, lined with age, held a calm that unsettled him more than fear ever could. "I will not kneel," she said. Something in her tone, steady, almost motherly, slipped under Brick's skin like a blade. His anger flared. "You will," he snarled, and with the back of his hand, he struck her across the face. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The piano player flinched. The bartender froze. A man near the door whispered a prayer under his breath. Evelyn stumbled but caught herself, palm braced on a table leg. A trickle of blood touched her lip, but she didn't raise a hand to wipe it. She just looked at him, not with hatred, not with fear, but with an odd sorrow. The room felt suspended in time, as though every breath had been stolen by the violence they'd just witnessed. Brick, breathing heavy, spat near her boots. "That's what happens when you forget your place." Evelyn drew in a slow breath, her voice barely above a whisper but sharp enough to cut stone. "My boy won't like what you've done." A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. Some frowned. Some blinked. Brick barked a laugh, buckling forward with amusement. "Your boy," he mocked. "What's he gonna do? Bring you a handkerchief?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Someone near the corner table dropped his drink as realization dawned. The widow. Evelyn Hart. Hart. Whispers began to slither through the room like frightened snakes. That can't be. No, she wouldn't be. Her boy's been gone for years. Brick, drunk on cruelty, didn't notice their sudden fear. He kept laughing, a loud, ugly sound that filled the room with dread. "If your boy wants a fight, I'll bury him right next to you." But another man, voice shaking, interrupted. "Dalton, her boy, is Raven Hart. Brick's laughter died. His eyes twitched. Even he, cruel as he was, knew that name. The outlaw who once cleared a canyon full of rustlers alone. The shadow men feared to speak of. The ghost with a rifle who vanished 4 years ago after avenging a brother. Evelyn's gaze stayed steady. You should v touched me, Brick. She said it not as a threat, but as a fact written by fate. Brick tried to scoff, tried to shake off the rising dread, but his voice cracked. Ravenheart's dead. Or run. Or nothing to worry about. Evelyn closed her eyes. My boy always comes home. A sudden cry from outside pierced the silence, the sharp, haunting whinny of a horse cutting through the cold twilight. The saloon doors rattled against a gust of wind that rolled dust down the street like warning smoke. Cards slipped from a gambler's trembling hands. Someone muttered, No, it can't be him. The piano player stood slowly, backing away from his bench. A woman near the corner clutched her shawl to her chest. Brick licked his lips. His bravado was slipping like sand through fingers. What was that? He stammered. The bartender didn't lift his eyes from the floor when he spoke, his voice barely audible but carrying the weight of truth. God help us, he whispered. He's coming home. Dust draped itself across the canyon like a veil of burnt gold, and through that fading light rode a man whose presence unsettled even the wind. Ravenheart sat tall in the saddle, a long raven-black coat trailing behind him like the shadow of a storm. His eyes, glacier-cold and steady, scanned the jagged cliffs as though nothing in the world could hide from him. The stallion beneath him, a dark, muscled beast named Vesper, snorted at the rising chill, but Raven didn't slow. He moved with the patience of a hunter who knew exactly where fate was leading him. The narrator inside every whisper of the land seemed to murmur the truth. This was the outlaw who vanished 4 years ago, the ghost who buried his brother with his own bare hands and then disappeared into the desert's mouth. Some said grief hollowed him. Others claimed vengeance had turned him into something inhuman. But those who truly knew feared a different truth. Ravenheart never left because he was lost. He left because he was waiting for the world to give him one final reason to return. That reason found him as the canyon walls tightened around the narrow trail. Vesper's ears pricked forward, muscles tensing as though the horse sensed something drifting on the cold air. Raven pulled gently on the reins, calming the stallion with a whisper. Easy, boy. But his gaze hardened. Animals felt danger before humans did. And this particular danger had his blood in it. A memory rose unbidden, sharp as a spur. Evelyn Hart, standing at the edge of their small cabin, her soft voice telling 2 young boys that strength didn't come from fists or bullets, but from standing between darkness and those who couldn't fight it. She raised them alone after their father died in a mine collapse, buried under timber and greed. She buried her tears at night, then rose at dawn to teach them how to shoot, how to track, how to survive. She raised her sons to be men of honor in a world that worshipped violence. Raven had carried those lessons like scripture. His brother Eli had carried them like a dream. Losing Eli carved a hollow inside Raven that no number of miles could fill. But tonight, as Elderwood's distant lights shimmered like trembling embers, the hollow stirred with something else, a warning. He nudged Vesper forward. The horse moved reluctantly, hooves thudding on the hard earth as though each step brought them closer to something the stallion feared. Raven's jaw tightened. His horse was never wrong. Miles ahead, fear spread through Elderwood like a dropped lantern in dry grass. Men burst through swinging doors. Women whispered at windows. Cowboys who'd faced down rustlers and bandits now sank into their chairs with trembling hands. The widow was attacked, someone said, voice barely audible. Brick Dalton hit her. The words jumped from mouth to mouth, each retelling dripping with disbelief and growing dread. To harm Evelyn Hart was to invoke a death sentence older than law. Every outlaw knew it. Every rancher whispered it. Every merchant prayed they'd never see the day someone crossed that line. Ravenheart never killed without cause. He was merciful by nature, violent only when cornered, and always fair. But there was one unbreakable rule he carved into the West with his own hands. Hurt his mother, and justice rode behind him like a storm. Elderwood felt that storm long before it arrived. While the town trembled, Evelyn sat alone in her dim cabin, a cloth pressed to her cheek where blood had dried hours ago. Her hand shook, not from pain, but from the knowledge of what this night would bring. She had tried to protect her sons from the violent world she knew too well, but life had taught her long ago that no mother could shield her children from who they were meant to become. Before she became a widow, before children softened her spirit, Evelyn Hart was something the West had nearly forgotten, a sharpshooter with a traveling wild show, a woman who snapped bullseyes out of the air and lit matches with bullets from 50 paces. Crowds adored her. Competitors feared her. And when she retired to raise her children, she passed down every skill she possessed. She taught them to vanish into shadows, to track footprints across stone, to move like ghosts in a world of wolves. She prayed they would use those skills for good. But she also knew skills like those never stayed buried forever. She touched a bruise on her cheek and closed her eyes. Lord, keep my boy's heart steady. But she knew the Lord had little sway in the lives of men forged by grief and sharpened by injustice. The night deepened as Raven reached the edge of town. Elderwood lay before him, silent, shivering in the desert wind. Lanterns flickered in windows, but no laughter spilled from saloons. No music drifted from the broken piano. The whole town felt like it was holding its breath. Vesper pawed the ground. Raven dismounted slowly, boots landing in dust with a quiet thud. He walked toward his childhood home, a small cabin with peeling paint and a single lantern burning in the window. From a distance, it looked peaceful. Up close, he saw it, a smear of dried blood on Evelyn's doorframe. His pulse went cold. He pushed the door open. The hinges creaked like bones. Inside, Evelyn sat in her rocking chair, the bruise on her cheek darkening by the minute. She looked up, eyes watering with relief and dread. "You came fast," she whispered. Raven stepped closer. "I felt something wrong." Her lips trembled. "There's nothing you need to do." But he had already seen the truth written on her face. He knelt in front of her, brushing a thumb under the bruise with heartbreaking tenderness. "Who did this?" Evelyn shook her head. "Raven, listen to me. Tell me his name." "Son." "His name." She gripped his coat, her voice tightening with the force of a mother holding back the storm. "You are not the darkness this world made you believe you are." Raven didn't move, didn't blink. "A man must earn his justice without turning to darkness," she whispered. Silence pooled between them, thick as desert heat. A silence that carried more truth than words ever could. Raven rose slowly. There was no shouting, no threat, no dramatic creak of knuckles. Only a controlled stillness, the kind that belonged to a predator moments before the strike. Without another word, he stepped out of the cabin, the lantern light spilling across the hard line of his jaw, revealing eyes that no longer resembled ice but fire. Vesper whinnied softly as he climbed into the saddle. Raven gave his mother one last look, a look that held love, sorrow, and a promise he didn't need to speak aloud. Then he rode toward the night, toward the outskirts where Brick Dalton and his gang were already trembling in the shadows. Darkness didn't need to claim Ravenheart. It had been waiting for him. Brick Dalton had always believed himself untouchable. He strutted through towns, cracking jaws, kicking chairs, pulling pistols on men who looked at him too long. But when the whisper reached him, "Ravenheart is coming," the swagger drained from his bones like water spilling through cracked earth. His breath hitched. His throat tightened. His hands, once steady as carved stone, trembled as he fumbled to load bullets into his revolver. He tried to steady himself, but the fear slipped through anyway. He shoved past the saloon doors and ran into the night, boots slamming against the dirt road with none of the confidence he carried earlier. Panic twisted inside him like a rusted knife. He muttered to himself that the stories were exaggerated, that Ravenheart was just a man. But even Brick didn't believe that lie. He'd heard too many tales whispered by dying outlaws who shook at the mere mention of the name. The abandoned silver mine sat miles out of town, crouched against the mountains like a wounded beast. Brick didn't stop running until he reached the jagged entrance, breath ragged, shirt soaked with sweat. His gang of 7 lounged near a fire, laughing and drinking, but their grins faltered when they saw his face. "Boss," one asked, "you look like you've seen the devil." Brick swallowed hard. "Worse," he rasped. "Ravenheart." The fire snapped sharply, as if recoiling from the name. Every man there stiffened. The laughter died instantly. Each of them had heard stories, some true, some stretched, but all terrifying. Silence settled like a shroud. One of the younger men, jittery and pale, finally whispered, "He ain't real." Brick snapped back, voice cracking. "He's real enough to kill every last one of us if we don't move." Fear made them obey. They scattered into the tunnels like rats diving for shelter, the mine swallowing them whole. Long before Brick Dalton tasted panic, Ravenheart had earned his legend the hard way. Years back, near the Red Mesa Plains, a rustler crew of 12 men stole cattle from a poor widow with 6 children. No one dared confront them. No sheriff rode out. No rancher stood up. But Raven did. He rode alone into their canyon hideout, not with swagger or noise, but with ghost-like quiet. Witnesses claimed they saw him approach through the dust with the stillness of a man walking through a dream, rifle resting across his saddle as if part of him. The rustlers mocked him at first. One fired a warning shot. Another laughed, saying one man couldn't face 12. But Raven didn't draw. Not until they made the mistake of shooting at his horse, grazing the animal's flank. Then the desert erupted. Raven moved with a calm that defied reason. He shot 2 rifles from hands before they even realized they'd drawn. A third man dropped, grazed in the leg, crying out. Raven didn't kill them unless they forced his hand. But force it they did. When 3 rushed him at once, he fired 3 shots, each bullet finding the center of a forehead as if destiny guided his aim. The remaining rustlers fled into the cliffs, only to fall to his long-range fire. Every bullet he sent seemed almost lazy, drifting through the heat before touching its mark. Some men swore he didn't aim at all. They said he simply looked, and the rifle understood. When the fight was over, 6 rustlers lay dead. The rest surrendered, shaking, begging to be spared. Raven bound them and left them for the sheriff with a note pinned to their leader's chest. This world is hard enough without men who make it cruel. Stories spread like wildfire across the frontier. Some called Raven a butcher. Others called him a guardian. But no one denied his skill. His bullets found their targets like loyal dogs obeying a master's whistle. So when the 7 men in Brick Dalton's gang heard the name, their bravado shriveled. They knew the tales, and they believed every one of them. Inside the abandoned mine, the men lit lanterns and began fortifying their position. Brick barked orders, desperate to mask the tremor in his voice. The tunnels stretched deep into the earth, twisting like the insides of some ancient beast. They built barricades from broken timbers, piled rocks near choke points, and tested old crates of dynamite left by miners too poor or too smart to return. Put 2 rifles on the east tunnel, Brick snapped. Ain't no way he's getting through there. 2 men hurried off, their silhouettes swallowed by the dark. Set traps. Brick demanded. Tripwire, anything. His men obeyed. They rigged rusted minecarts to roll downhill, set planks over false floors, placed lanterns strategically to create long shadows. The air grew thick with sweat, dust, and dread. Every flickering flame threw sharp edges across their faces, revealing the fear they tried so hard to hide. One man near the entrance muttered, "He ain't even here yet and I can't breathe." Another whispered, "I heard he once shot a man through a chimney pipe." "Shut up," Brick hissed. But his voice held no conviction. Far outside, the desert wind shifted. Sand drifted in thin sheets across the ground, and Ravenheart moved through that wind with the deliberate grace of a wolf stalking its prey. He followed footprints barely visible under the rising dust, cigarette ash crushed beneath hurried boots, and the faint smell of fear carried by the breeze. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He didn't curse the night. He simply moved, silent and precise, the long barrel of his rifle glinting in the moonlight like a scythe waiting to harvest the wicked. There was patience in every step he took, a predator's rhythm that belonged to someone who had accepted long ago that justice took time and blood. He reached a ridge overlooking the mine and crouched behind a cluster of boulders. From up high, he could see the lantern glow spilling weakly from the tunnels. He counted 7 shadows, 7 men who believed darkness could protect them. Raven's breath steadied, soft as drifting snow. He lifted his rifle, its scope reflecting the stars. 200 yards. A whisper of wind brushed his cheek. He adjusted by a hair. The lantern at the tunnel mouth flickered. Raven squeezed the trigger. The blast echoed across the valley like thunder ripping through bone. The lantern shattered instantly, plunging the entrance into darkness. Screams erupted inside the mine, followed by frantic scrambling and curses. Another lantern glowed deeper inside. Raven fired again. Another burst of darkness swallowed the light. Panic surged within the tunnels. Men tripped over crates, stumbled into each other, grasping blindly for their rifles as the night closed in around them. Brick howled, "He's here! He's here!" But the darkness only answered with silence. And in that silence, every man knew the same cold truth. The legend wasn't a story. Ravenheart had come back to life. The mine breathed darkness like an ancient creature waking from a long sleep. Dust drifted through the tunnels in thin, ghostly veils, catching the dim glow of the last surviving lanterns. Raven moved through that darkness without a sound, each step careful, each breath measured. The gang's frantic shouts bounced chaotically along the walls, their echoes multiplying until it became impossible for them to know where he truly was. Raven used that confusion like a weapon. Every shifting shadow became a decoy, every dust cloud an ally. One of the outlaws fired blindly into the gloom, the bullet sparking against stone. Raven didn't flinch. He waited, patient as winter. When the men stepped forward to see if he'd hit something, Raven's silhouette appeared behind him like a rising nightmare. A swift strike to the jaw, a twist of the wrist, and the outlaw collapsed silently, his weapon clattering on the ground. Raven caught the pistol before it fell, placed it gently beside the unconscious body, and disappeared into the dark again. Two more men tried working together, moving back to back down a narrow corridor, rifles trembling in their hands. Raven listened to their footsteps scrape softly across old timber. When one of them whispered, "Where is he?" Raven shifted a pebble on the opposite side. Both men swung toward the sound. Their backs opened for a fraction of a second, just enough. Raven stepped between them like a passing breeze, knocking the rifles aside and dropping them with the precision of a men trained by life and loss rather than any gunslinger school. Further down the tunnel, Brick Dalton screamed into the darkness, his voice cracking with panic. "Hold the damn lines. Shoot anything that moves." But every command rang hollow. Every shout sounded like fear trying to disguise itself as authority. The men no longer listened. They stumbled over each other, tripped on loose cables, swung their weapons aimlessly, and Raven moved between them like a phantom guiding their downfall. Another outlaw tried to ignite a stick of dynamite in desperation, but shaking hands fumbled the match. Raven's boot kicked it aside before it sparked, and the man's attempt at bravery ended with him being disarmed and left groaning on the floor. A scream echoed deeper inside, and the gang's final pockets of resistance broke apart. They didn't know how many were left standing. They didn't know if Raven was inches away or a mile back. All they knew was that shadows could kill tonight. When the last of Brick's men fell, silence filled the mine, a heavy, suffocating silence broken only by Brick Dalton's ragged breathing. He realized he was alone, truly alone. Fear devoured the last remnants of his pride. He stumbled backward into a deeper tunnel, tripping over rails, scraping his shoulder against jagged stone. His bravado, once loud enough to fill saloons and empty towns, now shrank to a whimper swallowed by the cavern's black throat. Raven followed without hurry. The mine had become a labyrinth Brick could barely navigate, but Raven's steps remained steady, each footfall deliberate and certain. He followed the scent of fear, the sound of frantic footsteps, the faint trail of disturbed dust. Brick reached the end of the tunnel, a collapsed silver shaft where the earth had caved in, leaving only a sliver of air and no escape. He turned and saw Raven standing in the lantern's dim glow, rifle lowered but posture tense, gaze cold enough to freeze marrow. Brick dropped to his knees. His voice shook. "Please, don't. I didn't know she was your mother. I was drunk. I didn't mean it." Raven didn't blink. "You touched the only saint I ever knew." Brick's lips trembled. "Please. I'll leave. I swear it. I'll ride till my horse dies. Just don't kill me." Raven lifted his revolver slowly, the barrel aligning with Brick's forehead. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Brick's eyes watered, sweat dripping down his temples as he waited for the thunder of judgment. But something else broke the silence. A soft, desperate voice echoing down the tunnel. "Raven, son, stop." Evelyn Hart appeared at the tunnel's mouth, lantern in hand, her breath labored from the long run. The light flickered across the fear carved into her face. Raven wavered, torn between rage and the deep love that guided every part of him. She stepped closer, her voice trembling but steady enough to reach him. "This isn't who you are. Justice without mercy is just another kind of outlawry." Her hand touched the barrel of his gun, lowering it with the gentleness of a mother touching her child's fevered brow. "You've walked through darkness before. Don't let it take you tonight." Brick sobbed, collapsing against the rocks in relief. Raven's jaw clenched, the fire in his eyes dimming but not extinguishing. He holstered the revolver slowly. Evelyn turned to Brick, her eyes fierce in a way that reminded Raven of the sharpshooter she once was. "Go," she said, voice low and commanding. "Crawl out of here and never return. If you ever raise a hand to another innocent again, my son won't need to find you. I will." Brick nodded frantically, scrambling on all fours toward the exit like a desperate animal freed from a trap. He didn't look back once. Raven stood beside his mother, shoulders rising and falling in slow, controlled breaths. She reached out and touched his cheek, thumb tracing a line only a mother could see. a reminder that he was still human, still hers. For a long moment, the mind held not darkness, but something softer, something earned through pain and love. By morning, Brick Dalton was gone from Elderwood, riding until his horse foamed at the mouth, leaving behind a trail of cowardice and dust. No one pursued him. No one mourned his departure. He vanished like a bad word erased from a holy book. Raven stayed only one night with his mother, sitting beside her on the porch as dawn painted the sky in amber and rose. They spoke little. They didn't need to. Peace hung between them, fragile, precious, and temporary. When the sun rose fully, Raven saddled Vesper and rode out of Elderwood without looking back. Some said they saw him heading toward the canyons. Others swore he dissolved into the horizon like a ghost returning to the stories that made him. And the narrator of the West, that invisible voice carried by dust and wind, whispered the truth that would echo for generations. Some legends are born from violence, others from love, but his was forged from both.